All right. So are you ready to dive into some corporate governance?
I am. I think this is going to be a really interesting one.
Yeah, we've got some great source material here.
Yeah.
Excerpts from the new compliance officer playbook,
Okay.
and then a couple of other articles about warning signs of weak corporate governance.
Yeah, this will be applicable to like anybody who's researching a company
Right.
or just anybody who wants to be more informed.
Absolutely. Or if you're, prepping for a meeting or something like that.
Sure.
Um, so let's just get right into it, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, what is corporate governance?
So corporate governance, basically, it's the system of rules and processes
Okay.
that dictate how a company is run.
I see.
And so good corporate governance is going to ensure accountability,
Right.
fairness, transparency,
Mm-hmm.
all of which are going to lead to better trust.
With stakeholders.
With stakeholders, exactly.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've definitely felt misled by companies before.
Yeah.
So that's why this is so interesting to me.
Yeah.
So let's go through these 10 warning signs of wonk corporate governance.
Okay, that's good.
The first one is lack of board independence.
Yes.
So I know that, boards are supposed to oversee management.
Mm.
But what are some ways that companies can kind of mask that?
So you're going to have a board
Right.
that's packed with insiders,
Okay.
and that's not good. That's going to lead to biased decision-making.
Like the CEO's friends or something?
Yeah, exactly. Like golfing buddies,
Okay.
family members,
Right.
it's like the fox guarding the hen house.
So you want people with like different backgrounds and expertise.
Exactly. Yeah, diverse backgrounds,
Okay.
different expertise, and most importantly, no personal ties.
Gotcha.
Yeah, to the CEO or any of the executives.
Okay. So they're not afraid to kind of push back.
Yeah, you want people that can push back against the CEO,
Right.
ask the hard questions,
Mm-hmm.
challenge the status quo a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, because without that, it's just a rubber stamp for the CEO.
Exactly.
Okay. That makes sense. So the next one is inadequate oversight by the board.
Right.
I think this is interesting because it's not necessarily like blatant corruption.
No,
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just they're not paying attention.
they're just asleep at the wheel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like they're not doing their job.
Exactly. And that can be just as damaging
Right.
as any sort of explicit corruption.
Yeah. So true.
Yeah.
All right. Number 3, absence of a clear governance framework.
Right.
So to me, this is like assembling furniture
Yeah.
without instructions.
Exactly. No blueprint.
Yeah.
You
You could probably eventually do it, but
yeah, it's going to be a lot harder.
it'll take a lot longer.
Yeah, it'll take way longer than it needs to.
Yeah. So you want that clear framework so you know what's happening.
You need the rules of the game
Right.
laid out in front of you.
Okay.
The process for decision-making,
Yeah.
the mechanisms for accountability.
Okay.
Because if you don't have that,
Right.
then different departments might be operating
Right.
under different sets of assumptions.
Yeah. Like,
And so that can lead to conflict, that can lead to chaos.
yeah. It's
and
like
I-
driving in a city with no traffic lights or stop signs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Accidents are going to happen.
Accidents are bound to happen.
Okay, number 4, excessive CEO power.
Yes.
So obviously you want a CEO to be a strong leader,
Mm-hmm.
but when does it go too far,
Right. Well, you want a CEO that's confident,
right?
but you don't want one that's running the company like a dictator.
Right.
Yeah. And that's a hard line to find.
Yeah, it's a tough balance.
But it's important because
Yeah.
if you have a CEO with too much power, it can lead to
Complacency.
arrogance,
Yeah.
and it can lead to a disregard for ethical considerations.
We're really talking about like checks and balances.
Exactly,
Yeah.
checks and balances.
Okay.
Making sure that nobody has too much power.
And that makes sense because like if you look at, historical examples.
Right. Of like absolute power, it doesn't usually end well.
Yeah, rarely ends well.
All right, number 5, poor risk management practices.
Yeah.
I think this is something that's easy to overlook.
Yeah, it's easy to overlook until it's too late.
Yeah, it's like not backing up your computer
Yeah, exactly.
until you lose all your data.
Until your hard drive
Oh,
crashes
no.
and you're like, oh, well, I should have backed that up.
Exactly.
But every company faces risks.
Right.
Whether it's economic downturns,
Mhm.
cybersecurity threats,
Yeah.
supply chain problems,
Right.
changes in consumer preferences.
So it's not just about avoiding those disasters.
Right.
It's about having a plan.
It's about being prepared. It's about anticipating those challenges
Okay.
and having a strategy in place to deal with them.
So it's like having a weather forecasting system for your business.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, number 6, inadequate transparency and disclosure.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm someone who actually reads those long
Yeah.
annual reports. But even I feel like companies are sometimes hiding stuff. So how can you tell if a company is actually being transparent?
Well, it goes beyond just publishing the annual report.
Right.
Like you have to look at, are they open?
Okay.
about how the company operates, what challenges are they facing,
Yeah.
what are their plans for the future,
Mm-hmm.
and is the information that they're giving clear and concise?
Right. So it's not just quantity of information, it's
Well,
quality.
it's quality, exactly. And are they willing to answer tough questions
From.
from investors, or
Yeah.
journalists?
Okay.
You know?
Because sometimes I feel like they bury important info.
Yeah, they try to hide it in the fine print,
Exactly.
hoping nobody will notice.
So that's a red flag.
That is a big red flag.
Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense. All right. Number 7.
Okay.
High turnover in leadership positions.
Right. Right.
Hmm.
Obviously, some turnover is normal.
Yeah, some turnover is totally normal.
But when should you start to be concerned?
Right. Well, it's not necessarily just the quantity.
Okay.
You have to look at the context.
Mm-hmm.
So if you see a pattern of executives leaving,
Right.
especially key positions like CEO, CFO, COO,
Okay.
that's a sign that something might be wrong.
It's like going to a restaurant.
Yeah,
It's totally empty.
exactly. And you're like,
Makes you wonder.
I wonder if the food's any good.
Yeah, so you really have to look into why those people are leaving.
Yeah, what are the reasons behind the departures?
Okay.
Are they leaving because of disagreements over strategy?
Mm-hmm.
Are they leaving because of ethical concerns?
Okay.
Are they leaving because there's just like a toxic work environment?
Yeah?
So you have to dig a little deeper.
Okay.
Yeah.
Number 8, failure to address stakeholder concerns.
Right.
And this seems super relevant today
Yeah.
because companies are under so much pressure
Mm-hmm.
to not just be, responsible for their shareholders,
Right.
but also their employees, their customers, the community suppliers.
Exactly. Yeah, we're seeing this big shift from shareholder primacy.
Right. Stakeholder capitalism.
Okay.
The idea that companies have a responsibility
Mhm.
to all their stakeholders,
Okay.
not just the shareholders.
And this is driven by a lot of things,
Yeah.
awareness of social issues,
Yeah.
environmental issues,
Environmental issues.
pressure from investors.
Yeah, investors and consumers
Right.
are really driving this shift.
Yeah, it's not just about profits anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about creating value for all stakeholders.
Okay.
And companies that ignore that do so at their own peril.
Yeah, it makes me think about all those headlines we see.
Yeah.
Like companies getting boycotted.
Exactly.
Okay.
For using sweatshop labor
Yeah. Or, pollution.
or polluting the environment.
Exactly. So like the stakes are higher now?
The stakes are definitely higher.
Okay.
Yeah.
Number 9, weak internal controls.
Yes.
So basically this is about having safeguards
Right.
in place.
To prevent fraud, to prevent errors,
Yeah.
to prevent any sort of mishaps.
Like a security system for your company.
It's like a security system for your company's finances and operations.
Okay.
So it's making sure that you have checks and balances
Mm-hmm.
to prevent any sort of abuse.
Yeah. And it's not just having those procedures.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
about having a culture where people feel like they can
Exactly.
speak up.
That's about the culture.
Okay.
Yeah.
Number 10, resistance to change and innovation.
Right.
So in today's world, it seems like you have to be constantly evolving.
Just to adapt or die, basically,
Yeah.
in the business world.
But how can you tell if a company is stuck in its ways?
Well, one of the telltale signs is a lack of investment
Okay.
in research and development.
Mm-hmm.
If a company's not spending money
Right.
on exploring new ideas,
Yeah.
on developing new products or services,
Right.
that's a sign that they're not taking innovation seriously.
It's like that classic story
Yeah.
of the buggy whip manufacturers who didn't think cars were going to be a thing.
Didn't think automobiles were the future. Yeah, and look what happened.
And they went the way of the dinosaurs.
So you really want a company that's willing to embrace those new ideas.
Yeah. Embrace uncertainty. Push the boundaries a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
And those are the ones that are most likely to thrive.
Exactly.
All right, so we went over those 10 warning signs.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm already starting to see things a little differently.
Good.
But I'm curious about the other side of this.
Right.
Like, what does good corporate governance look like in practice?
That's a great question, and that's something we'll explore in the next part.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, we'll look at some real-world examples
I can't wait.
of companies that are getting it right.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm ready to hear about some companies that are getting this right.
Yeah.
Because I got to admit, after all those warning signs,
Yeah.
I'm feeling a little nervous.
It's understandable.
Yeah.
But there are companies out there
Okay.
that are doing things the right way.
Okay, so tell me about a company that's doing it right. Let's talk about Xerox.
Okay.
Back in the late 90s,
Yeah.
they were in a lot of trouble.
Okay.
Mountain of debt, stock price was plummeting.
Right.
Really on the verge of collapse.
So how did they turn things around?
Well, one of the biggest things was they brought in Ann Multahi as CEO.
Okay.
She was known for her straight-talking style, commitment to ethical leadership,
Right.
and just a deep understanding of the company's culture.
Okay.
And she didn't come in with all the answers.
Yeah.
She came in with a willingness to ask tough questions
Okay.
and make some bold decisions.
So what does she do specifically to, like, strengthen their governance?
Well, she started by shaking up the board of directors,
Okay.
brought in more independent directors
Right.
with diverse backgrounds and expertise.
So she was addressing that lack of board independence.
Exactly.
Oh.
So, getting different perspectives at the table,
Okay.
challenging groupthink,
Right.
providing more robust oversight.
Okay. And what about those other warning signs? Like the inadequate oversight, the lack of transparency?
She addressed those too.
Okay.
She implemented stricter financial controls, increased transparency in the company's reporting,
Right.
and really committed to communicating openly and honestly with stakeholders.
So basically, she went through that list of warning signs
Yeah,
and just tackled each one.
basically.
Okay.
And it wasn't a quick fix,
Right.
but it worked.
So they regained their financial footing.
Exactly.
Investor confidence.
Yep,
Became leaders in corporate social responsibility.
they did.
That's a really inspiring story.
It is.
It shows that even when things seem really bad,
Mhm.
you can turn things around.
You can.
Okay, so Xerox is one example.
Yeah.
Are there other companies that are doing things differently?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
There's this growing movement
Yeah.
of companies that are embracing stakeholder capitalism.
Okay, I've heard that term, but I don't really know what it means.
So basically, it's the idea that a company's purpose is to create value for all its stakeholders,
wow.
not just its shareholders.
All right, so give me an example of company that's doing that.
Let's look at Unilever.
Oh,
They've made a public commitment
Yeah.
to putting sustainability and social impact at the heart of their business strategy.
So they're not just talking the talk.
No, they're walking the wall.
What are they actually doing?
So they've implemented all sorts of initiatives,
Okay.
like sourcing sustainable palm oil,
Okay.
providing access to clean water and sanitation in developing countries.
Wow.
They've even tied executive compensation to their sustainability performance.
Oh, wow. So they're really putting their money where their mouth is.
Exactly.
Okay.
And it's not just about altruism.
All right.
They've actually found that this focus on sustainability is driving business growth.
Because consumers care about that now.
Yeah, consumers are drawn to brands that align with their values.
Makes sense.
And investors are looking for companies that are managing ESG risks.
Right.
So it's a win-win.
Yeah. They're doing good and doing well.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's Unilever.
Mm-hmm.
What about technology?
Oh, yeah, technology is a huge part of this.
Right, because, like, I'm a techie, so I'm always curious about
Yeah.
new ways that it's being used.
Well, technology is becoming an increasingly important tool
Okay.
for enhancing transparency,
Mm-hmm.
efficiency, and accountability.
Okay.
And so companies are using data analytics
Okay.
to monitor transactions,
Mm-hmm.
identify potential risks, and detect fraud.
It's like having a digital detective.
Exactly.
That's cool.
Yeah. And it's not just about catching bad guys.
Right.
It's also about streamlining compliance processes,
Okay.
automating reporting,
Mm-hmm.
making it easier for stakeholders to access information.
So it's also about empowering stakeholders.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah,
And I think that technology can also help with that board oversight that we
Okay.
talked about before.
absolutely.
So if they have access to, real-time data,
Yeah.
they're better equipped to do their job. Exactly. They can be more proactive,
Okay.
more engaged in their oversight role.
So technology is really transforming this whole space.
It is.
All right, so we talked about Xerox and Unilever. We talked
Yeah.
about technology.
Yeah.
But I'm also wondering about what individuals can do.
Right?
Like, what
Yeah.
can I do
Yeah.
to promote good governance?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And the good news is there are a lot of things you can do.
Okay, good.
So as an investor,
Mm-hmm.
you can use your power to support companies that align with your values.
Okay.
You can research a company's ESG performance,
Mm-hmm.
engage with management on governance issues,
Okay.
and you can even consider investing in funds
Right.
that focus on sustainable and responsible businesses.
So put your money where your mouth is.
Exactly.
Okay. What about as a consumer?
As a consumer, you can choose to support companies that are transparent
Right.
about their practices, that treat their employees fairly,
Okay.
and that operate in an environmentally sustainable way. So every choice we make sends a message.
It does.
Okay.
Yeah, and don't underestimate the power of collective action.
Right.
When consumers speak up and demand better from companies,
Right.
it can have a real impact.
It makes me think about those boycotts that have happened.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Those are powerful demonstrations.
Okay, so as investors and consumers, we have a role to play.
Mm-hmm.
What about employees?
Well, as employees,
Yeah.
we're often the first to see when things aren't right.
Right.
We might notice unethical behavior,
Yeah.
unsafe working conditions, a lack of transparency.
But speaking up can be risky.
It can be.
Yeah.
It takes courage to speak up, especially when you're challenging those in power.
Right.
But there are ways to do it safely and effectively.
Okay. So how?
Well, you can start by documenting any concerns you have,
Okay.
gathering evidence to support your claims.
So be prepared.
Be prepared exactly.
Okay.
And it's also important to understand your company's policies on whistleblowing
Right.
and your legal protections.
A lot of companies have established channels
Mm-hmm.
for reporting ethical concerns.
Like a hotline or something.
Exactly like an anonymous hotline
Okay.
or an ombudsman.
So find the right avenue
Find the right avenue.
and do it safely.
Yeah. And remember, you're not alone.
Okay.
There are organizations out there
Right.
that provide support and guidance to whistleblowers.
Okay. Good to know.
Yeah. And even if you don't feel comfortable blowing the whistle publicly,
Yeah.
you can still make a difference
Oh.
by promoting a culture of ethics and integrity within your own team.
So lead by example.
Lead by example, exactly.
This has been a really eye-opening discussion.
Good.
We went from those warning signs
Yeah.
to these inspiring examples of good governance,
Mm.
and now we've talked about what we can do.
Yeah, it's an ongoing conversation.
So in our final part,
Right.
I'm excited to explore what the future holds.
Yeah, we're going to dive into some of those emerging trends.
Awesome.
Yeah. So we've talked about all those warning signs. We've seen how some companies are doing things right, and we've even talked about how we can play a role. But I'm really curious now about what the future holds. Like, what trends are on the horizon that are going to shape corporate governance going forward?
Well, I think one of the most significant trends is that shift that we touched on earlier, from shareholder primacy to stakeholder capitalism.
Right. We talked about Unilever,
Exactly.
but I want to dive a little deeper.
Sure. Yeah. So for decades, the prevailing view was that a company's main responsibility was to maximize shareholder value.
Right. Make their shareholders happy.
Exactly. But now there's this growing recognition that this narrow focus can have some negative consequences.
For everyone else?
Yeah. For employees, for customers, for communities,
Yeah.
and even the environment.
It's like squeezing all the juice out of an orange without thinking about the long-term health of the tree.
I love that analogy. Thanks. Yeah. Eventually you end up with a depleted orchard.
Right. And no more orange juice.
Exactly. And I think more and more companies are realizing that their long-term success really depends on their ability to create value for all of their stakeholders.
Not just the shareholders.
Not just the shareholders, exactly. And this shift is being driven by a lot of factors.
It's like what?
Well, growing awareness of social and environmental issues.
Okay.
You've got increasing pressure from investors and consumers,
Right.
and just a recognition that companies have a responsibility to society as a whole.
Yeah, it makes me think about all those companies that have gotten into trouble
Mm-hmm.
for things like sweatshop labor,
Right.
polluting, or data privacy violations.
Yeah, the stakes are definitely higher now for companies that fail to prioritize those ethical and sustainable practices.
Because consumers are paying attention.
Exactly. Consumers are much more discerning now.
They're voting with their wallets.
They are. And investors are also paying more attention to these ESG factors,
Which are?
environmental, social, and governance factors, because they're recognizing that companies that manage these issues well are going to be more resilient and more profitable in the long run.
So it's not just about looking good. It's about actually being good.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that good governance is good business.
So this stakeholder capitalism thing sounds like it could really change things.
It has the potential to reshape how companies operate,
In what ways?
well, leading to more sustainable business models,
Okay.
a greater focus on social impact,
Mm.
and maybe even a more equitable distribution of wealth.
So what other trends are you seeing?
Another big one is that increasing use of technology to enhance transparency and accountability.
Right. We talked about how companies are using data analytics and AI
Right.
to, monitor transactions and detect fraud. But are there other ways that technology is being used?
Absolutely, yeah. So these tools can be used to improve stakeholder engagement,
Okay.
to facilitate communication,
Mm-hmm.
and to provide real-time insights into a company's operations.
This makes me think about how tech is being used in other industries.
Healthcare and
Yeah,
education.
personalized experiences.
Yeah, and empower individuals.
Right. So could we see a similar trend in corporate governance?
I mean, that would be pretty amazing.
It would, and I think we're starting to see that.
Okay.
Well, there are emerging platforms that allow shareholders to vote electronically,
Oh, wow.
to access company documents, and
Uh,
to communicate directly with board members.
so they actually have more of a voice.
Exactly, and I think this is just the beginning.
I can't wait to see what happens.
I know it's exciting.
So we've got stakeholder capitalism, we've got technology. What else?
Another trend that's gaining traction is the importance of building a strong ethical culture within an organization.
Right. So it's not just about compliance.
No, it's not just about checking boxes.
It's about creating a culture where people want to do the right thing.
Exactly, and this means fostering an environment where people feel empowered to speak up, to do the right thing, and to hold each other accountable.
Yeah, because when people are afraid to speak up, that's when things go wrong. It is. And it's not just about preventing misconduct. It's about creating a workplace where everyone feels valued and respected
Okay.
and aligned with the company's values.
And companies are actually putting resources into this.
They are. Yeah. We're seeing more and more companies investing in training programs and communication initiatives to build that strong ethical culture.
Because they're realizing that it's good for business.
Exactly. When employees feel good about where they work, they're more productive and more engaged.
This has been such a fascinating look into corporate governance.
It has been.
We've gone from those warning signs to these inspiring examples
Yeah.
to the future of how companies are run.
And I hope our listeners feel empowered to hold companies accountable and support those businesses that are doing things the right way.
Because it's all about creating a better world for all of us.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
It was my pleasure.
And we'll see you next time for another exploration of the ideas shaping our world.